Hey, it's Dan from learningcameras.com, and here we are again, and Fuji's got a brand new camera. This is called the X-M1. So Fuji's at it again with a new mirrorless camera. This one's also using an APS-C sensor, very similar to what we've seen in like the Pro1, their top of the line models, and also very similar to what we've seen in many of their other mirrorless cameras. So it is a 16 megapixel sensor. It does use their new technology. And so we're going to be seeing the same type sensor that we have seen in the X Pro1 camera, except it's in a smaller body and it's a fraction of the cost. So you're talking $699 for the body only, $799 for the body with the lens. So it's a very good deal, and we'll have to see what Fuji does with this. Now, we are waiting for this camera to arrive. It is not quite out yet if you're watching this video, so go ahead and subscribe, and then when the camera does come out and the review is up for the actual camera, you will get to see all of that information. It'll be sent to your newsfeed, so go ahead and subscribe to that. Now, there are a couple things that we do know about this camera already. I did recently review the X100s as well as the Fuji X20. So both of these are based off of a very similar technology in different ways, and there are a couple things that we do know from it. Now, one thing is going to be the build quality. Fuji X series cameras just have phenomenal build quality. They're metallic on it, they're very rigid, they don't feel like they're going to break if they're going to drop. All of the controls feel very firm to the touch. Very, very high quality camera, much better than what you're seeing from other manufacturers in a similar price. So this is a very big advantage for Fuji on this one. Another thing is the way that it looks. It's going to be very similar to the way Fuji is designing their other cameras, and it just looks unbelievable. The X100s that I just had, great looking camera, great functioning camera. So there's a lot of things that we do like and appreciate with the way that Fuji is doing their cameras. And another aspect of it is going to be that Fuji has really been putting a ton of features and modes and film features and things like that in these cameras. That's going to stay consistent with it. Another thing is that it's going to have the same sensor as the X Pro1. So we do know how that functions, and it functions great. Even though it's an APS-C sensor, which is a huge sensor for this kind of camera, it is basically topping performance that we've seen from other APS-C cameras like the Nikon D7100, the Canon 7D. Basically the amount of noise in the Fuji sensor has been less than both of those cameras. So we're really seeing performance almost at a full frame sensor level, except in a crop sensor camera. So basically you're going to get a sensor that's better than both of those cameras, at least on the sensor side, as far as low light results and many other things. Great dynamic range. A lot is being pushed through these Fuji sensors, and they're really delivering great results. And another thing that we have is the pricing. So the pricing is going to be $699 for the body only. The kit lens, which is a brand new lens that they're introducing, is a 16 to 50 millimeter f3.5 to 5.6 OS lens. And I must say it's a very good price for a lens like this. However, it is not going to get you the wide aperture that we're used to on some of the other Fuji cameras. So you're going to be looking at an f3.5 max, and really and truly once you zoom in a little bit more, it's going to be more like an f4 to f5.6 lens. Now, it is a lot wider than what we typically see on zoom lenses that start at about 18 millimeters and go up to 50-55. This lens is actually opening up at 16 millimeters, so a little bit wider. So that you're going to appreciate that if you love to do more landscape type stuff or indoor type stuff. And then 50 millimeters on an APS-C sensor is still a very good focal length. It's going to get you in there a little bit more, going to behave probably a little more like 75 to 80 millimeters on a full frame camera. Now, what's new? Well, there's a couple things that are going to be new, and one is that lens, which is a new combination lens from Fuji. Now, the lens combination with the Fuji camera, it is a very small camera, much smaller than what we've seen on the other Fuji cameras, but unfortunately when you combine that with the lens is not super small. So it's going to be bigger than what we've seen on like the X100s, where you had this very small pancake lens. Basically it was fixed, you couldn't interchange it at all, but it was a very small lens, and it led to the X100 feeling much smaller. This unfortunately is going to be a little bit larger zoom lens on that, and so it's going to make the camera seem a little bit bigger when you have that on there. Now, Fuji did come out with a 27 millimeter f2.8 lens, That's going to be great for this camera too. Unfortunately, the starting price, it looks like, is going to be $449, which is very high for a camera that's only $699. So almost the entire cost of the camera in a single fixed focal length lens. That's probably not going to be the most popular one. I wish Fuji had brought out something a little bit cheaper for that, just because this is really a more inexpensive camera than what we're seeing with the Pro1 and other cameras along that lines, where people would have been more willing to spend $500 on a single lens if they knew their camera was a $1,700 camera. But spending $500 on a lens for a $700 camera is going to be a little tough for many people. Now, another thing, in order to shrink that size, is that Fuji got rid of the optical viewfinder. Now, the optical viewfinder is kind of a love-hate relationship. Some people love it, some people don't use it at all. We're tending to trend ourselves into looking at the screen on the back more and more. I find myself using it a little bit more on cameras like the Fuji series cameras. The screen has increased in size on this one. It's actually a 3-inch screen. It's also going to be a higher resolution, over 900,000 pixels on that, which is much higher than what we've seen on the previous cameras, and also the previous ones were about a 2.8-inch screen on most of them. So a little bit of an upgrade on the screen, but we are losing that optical viewfinder. Now, as a straight optical viewfinder, I don't find myself using it as much, maybe when it's too bright to see the screen or something like that, but the framing is not through the lens, so keep that in mind. So you're actually going to get more accurate framing on these cameras from looking at the screen rather than the lens, so that's something to consider on that. So the optical viewfinder, while welcome, is not a feature that I miss all the time. Now, on the Fuji X100s, having the optical / electrical viewfinder was nice, because you had the best of both worlds inside of that viewfinder. But, you know, implementing that into a small camera like this, into a less expensive camera like this, I understand why Fuji couldn't do that in a price range like this. Now, we do have a little bit changes in the controls of this camera. The controls are more similar to what you see on most cameras, where you're going to have a mode dial and then 2 other dials for changing the functions. This is a little bit of a change from Fuji, who had more of a Leica type design, and a design more in the, as far as more comparative to some of the older film cameras and things like that, rather than the new cameras. So this is going to appeal a little bit more to people who have been using DSLRs and things like that, who are used to this type of setup. So I think it'll be welcome on there. I like it a lot. Also, the Fuji now has built-in Wi-Fi, which is huge for a camera this price point. Very low price point for a camera with built-in Wi-Fi. Now, we did just review the iFi Mobi card, and you can get a lot of that same functionality from using a card, but I always love to have it built into the camera, mostly because I can use any memory card I want. So I love using those SanDisk, basically the Extreme Ultra cards that I know that are very well built. I've got super high speeds of 60 or 90 megabytes a second, depending on which of the cards you go with. And so I know I can count on my cards. Whereas the iFi Mobi cards, I like using them as backup cards. I don't know how they're made, where they come from, their reliability, things like that as of now. So I don't like using those as my main card. So I'm really glad to see Wi-Fi built into the camera. We cannot, as of now, use it to control the features of the camera or get live previews from the camera, but you can basically go in, select the images that you like on that one, and then have them sent over to a computer, tablet, your phone, anything like that. They can be geotagged once you send them over to your phone, and they get GPS coordinates based on your phone. All that is basically built into that. So that's also very nice to see. You know, all in all, the Fuji M1 should be a very high performing camera. We know what the sensor can do. We know what Fuji lenses can do. So overall, very, very high performing camera is what we should see. Price point, very good for a camera like this, for being first introduced at $699 for the body only. It's not on the cheap side. It's definitely more on the expensive side, but considering the build quality you get and the style camera you get, and the fact that you're getting that DSLR size APS-C sensor in there, similar to what we've seen on the Nikon D5200, the Canon T5i, or even the higher end cameras like a Nikon D7100. All of those are using those same sensor sizes, and those cameras are just as expensive, if not more. So basically, you're getting a nice large sensor in that small package. Now, the only thing that worries me is going to be with the lens selection. The only reason that I'm not head over heels about the Fuji interchangeable lens cameras is that, you know, I don't have a buildup of Fuji lenses, and most people do not have a buildup of Fuji lenses. So to get a bunch of lenses is going to be a little bit costly up front, especially if you're talking about $450 for a nice pancake lens. I wish that they had introduced something a little bit cheaper for a fixed maybe f2.8 or f2 lens. I don't know why it has to be that much. We see cheaper lenses like this from some of the other manufacturers, like Canon has a 40mm f2.8 pancake lens. It's about $150 right now. I think it was $200 when it first came out. I'm not sure exactly why we're seeing such a high-priced lens from Fuji introduced with such a low-priced camera compared to their other ones. So, but it is what it is. So, you know, overall, that's the only thing that worries me, is we're going to be left with a little bigger camera once we add the zoom lens to it. But overall, it should be a solid performing camera. Once again, subscribe and you'll find out when the review is out, and we'll have the full information. We'll definitely get a hold of this camera. I'm very excited to see it and what it can perform.